My name is Emily. This is my YouTube channel, Pearl Jam Knits. I'm new to YouTube. This is my first YouTube video. I've been knitting for about a year. I learned how to knit 3 years ago, but I've only been consistently knitting for the past year. For right now, I just really wanted to hop on and show everything I've made and talk about it and talk about the yarn and the patterns. I'm going to be going in order of accessories first, and then I made one blanket, so I'll cover the blanket, then socks, and then sweaters. Yeah, so I tried to organize these for the most part in chronological order, and yeah, so this is everything I made in the past year from June 2024 up to now, which is June 2025. And the first thing that I made was a pair of mittens for my daughter. These were one of the first items that I made. The pattern is Mittens with Thumbs for Children by So Woolly. And I made these with Patton's Classic Wool Worsted in the color Dark Gray Marl. And I don't know if you can tell immediately, but I did make 2 left-hand mittens on accident. The pattern does have a variation for both right and left-hand mittens, but like I said, I was still a beginner when I made these, and so I was just so excited to be making one of my first projects that I just breezed through the pattern and I just made 2 left-hand mittens on accident. This pattern is available as both a blog post and a YouTube video for free online. I found it perusing on Pinterest. I typically would not use Pinterest to find a pattern now. I would just use Ravelry for every kind of pattern now. But at the time I didn't have a Ravelry account. I didn't even know what Ravelry was. I had never heard of it before. So I just looked on Pinterest and this was one of the first patterns that popped up. And the pattern is knit flat. So the mittens are knit flat starting at the cuff. So you work up the cuff in a 1x1 rib. I know it's kind of hard to see because of the yarn, but it does have a 1x1 rib cuff. And then you work up to the thumb flap, and then you work the thumb flap flat, and then you seam up the thumb flap here in the, like on the side. And then you continue going up the body of the mitten, working flat. You do some decreases here up at the top to sort of give it the dome shape. And then once you're done, you cast off when you get up here, and then you just seam the entire mitten down the side. They were pretty easy. I would still consider myself a beginner when I made these. And the pattern was easy to follow, and they worked up really quick. It was enjoyable. It really only took me, I think, 3 days total to make both of these. And I did use one of the recommended needle sizes. They recommend a 4mm needle for the ribbing, and then they recommend a 5mm needle for the body of the mitten. And at the time, I didn't have very many materials or supplies. The only needles I had on hand were a 4mm needle, so I was able to knit the ribbing with the 4mm needle. But then I did have a 4.5mm needle. I didn't have a 5, so I just used the 4.5 to knit the body. But I think it worked out great. This yarn, it's worsted weight, but I would kind of almost consider it a like in between DK and worsted, because it is a little bit thin for a worsted in my opinion, but it's also not so thin that I would confidently call it a DK weight yarn. Once you wash and block this yarn too, it does kind of plump up a little bit. Rather than right out of the skein, it is a lot thinner. This Patton's Classic Wool Worsted in the colorway Dark Gray Marl, it is a 2-ply yarn, and 1 ply is white and 1 ply is this dark gray color, which gives it the marling effect when you work up the fabric. It is 100% wool, which is why I picked this yarn. I was inspired to knit these for my daughter because I had heard it's more of an insulating material than just like acrylic, because she does have some commercially made, like store-bought mittens that are made of acrylic, and they really don't keep her hands very warm. They do. I noticed her hands get cold really quick. Like I can't have her wear them if she's gonna play in the snow or anything, because once they get wet, her hands are like freezing cold. So anyway, I had heard that wool is a better insulator, and I had also heard that it insulates when it's wet as well, which I thought would be really useful, especially in the snow. This was the only 100% wool yarn that they carried at the Michaels, which was closest to me. And at the time, I didn't know anything about wool, like fiber content or types of wool or anything like that. So I just saw 100% wool, and this was the only colorway they had as well, so I just bought it. But these are like a little bit itchy. My daughter never complains about them being uncomfortable, so I think it's fine for items like mittens, but it is, if I were to hold the fabric like up against my neck or like against my face, I can definitely feel an itch factor They are effective. We get a lot of use out of these. In the wintertime, my daughter wore these pretty much every day because we try to get like outside, we try to get some rec time every day, at least for a little bit, even when it's cold and even when it's snowy. But they do keep her hands warm, and they do keep her hands warm even when they're wet. I was a beginner when I worked on these, but the pattern was easy to follow. It was fun. They worked up quick. I would make these again, even like when my daughter outgrows these, I'll probably knit up another pair for her. The next item that I made, I actually don't have it with me because, spoiler alert, I lost it this past year, this winter. It's a big bummer because I got so much use out of this project. It was just a plain stockinette headband, and I did make it out of this same yarn, the Patton's Classic Wool Worsted in dark gray marl. So it kind of just looked like this, but it was just a headband, and it went all the way around and under my neck. It was just a stockinette, a long stockinette rectangle that I sewed together to make like a tube that I could wear as a headband. I made this because I usually wear my hair up. I have 2 small children, so during the day I wear my hair up so it's not getting like pulled or like sticky or wet. So anyway, I decided to make a headband so at least I had something to wear that could keep my ears warm, like when we go out in the cold. So it basically looked like this. It was just a headband. And one thing I learned with this project is that stockinette, like plain stockinette, will curl at the edges. I didn't know that at the time. I was still a beginner. So when I knit it up, I was scared that it would just kind of curl in on itself permanently and just be like a skinny little curled up tube. But once I finished it and I washed it and blocked it, it did relax for the most part. The ends still had like a little bit of curling, but it was nothing like unwearable or anything. So after this project, I did know that if I were to make anything stockinette, I should probably put some kind of border to like mitigate the curling. I got so much use out of this headband, and it's a bummer I lost it. So I'm probably gonna knit another one this year when it starts to get cold again. So the next project that I made was a Christmas scarf for my brother. And I also don't have this one because it was a gift. My brother did send me a picture of the scarf, so I can include it somewhere. I didn't use a pattern for this either. I, again, just knit up a super long stockinette rectangle, but this time I did put a garter stitch border all around the edges so that it wouldn't curl. It still curled a little bit while I was working it, but I gave it like a super intense steam blocking, and that like totally took out any like curl at all. The yarn that I used for this was Hobby Lobby's I Love This Yarn in the colorway Painted Canyon. And this is a variegated yarn. I'll try to put like a picture of what it looks like in the skein up. And this was a pretty nice yarn to work with. It is 100% acrylic, and it was very squishy. It was very soft. It was worsted weight, and I don't remember how many plies it had, but it was a variegated yarn, so in the skein it was really pretty. That's really what drew me to it. And it worked up into a fabric to include some stripes. They were like orange, teal, and then like a black and white speckled color, and yellow. This was my longest project thus far in my knitting career. I think this took me, I want to say like almost a month to knit it from start to finish. Next up is a pair of mittens that I actually made for myself. These are my Girls and Ladies Mittens number 101 by Neil Armstrong. And these are made with Hobby Lobby's I Love This Wool's Naturals in the color Umber. So as you can see, like immediately there is some pretty intense pilling on these. But just like all my other stuff that I have made, I used these constantly this winter. So I think that's why it's so bad, because I wore these almost every day. Like every time I would leave the house, even just to go out and get something from my car, I would smack these bad boys on, and they worked really well. I got a lot of use out of them, but you can see they do have some pilling. So a little bit about the pattern. This was actually when I made my Ravelry account, which was super exciting and eye-opening, because if you're a knitter or a crocheter and you're not using Ravelry, you got to get on there. You got to use it to search for patterns. It's like the best way to search for patterns. But I found these on Ravelry. It is a free pattern, and what drew me to it is they have this little cute cable cuff, and I was still like pretty much, I would still consider myself like maybe an advanced beginner at this stage. I had never done anything, any texture Definitely no cables or anything, so I was excited to work on that with these mittens, and I think it turned out really nice. And I realized that I like cable knitting with these. It was really fun. These are knit flat as well, so they're knit flat starting at the cuff. You work the cable, and there's also like a single rib little stripe in between each cable. So you work that up, and then you get to where the thumb is, you knit the thumb flap, seam up the thumb here on the side, and then you continue knitting the body, and you knit all the way to the top, and then you cinch it closed with a little hole, almost like it's a little hat, and then you seam up the side all the way down the side. And they were pretty easy. The cable was really easy. It was way easier than I thought. I was a little bit intimidated, thinking it might be like too difficult for me at the time, but it was easy and it came out pretty good. A little bit about this yarn. So like I was saying in the beginning, there is a lot of pilling. This yarn is made from 100% wool, and just like the previous yarn, it does not specify what type of wool. When I tried to do a little research to see if I could find the wool content, I can't find that information online either. So it just says 100% wool on the label. I actually have a little bit left from the skein that I used. So I also could not find this. I went on the Hobby Lobby's website. They don't have this listed anymore, so I'm not sure if it's discontinued or if something was just like going on with the website. But I also, the last time I went to Hobby Lobby, I didn't see it in store either, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. But so it may be discontinued, I'm not sure. It is a worsted weight, but once you kind of pull on it, it does thin out quite a bit. But it is worsted weight. It's softer than the Patons Classic Wool Worsted, so this one is a lot softer than this one. I don't know, I've never noticed any itch factor with this. But now that I hold it up to my neck, it is a little bit itchy, so it might not be ideal for garments or anything. And it also pills like crazy, so. But yeah, these mittens, I got a ton of use out of them. I probably will again this next upcoming winter. They were fun to make, they worked up quick. I mean, they're pretty small. This, however, was the first time that I ever experienced the second sock syndrome. I guess it would technically be second mitten knit syndrome. But when I knit the first mitten, I was like so pleased and excited, and like I really wanted to wear it, and I blocked it and everything. And then I was like, oh man, I have to knit another one. Like I wish I could just duplicate this. So those are all the accessories I made in the past year. Next up is my blanket. I knit this blanket for my youngest daughter to match her nursery. This is, I sort of roughly used a pattern. I just used a pattern to learn the basket weave stitch, but I didn't really use the pattern for the construction of the blanket, just to know how to make the basket weave fabric. But the pattern I did use to learn that was basket weave baby blanket, and I found it on the Lion brand yarn website. And the yarn that I used for this blanket it's the Michaels brand Loops and Thread in Sweet Snuggles Light. And I couldn't find the colors online because this yarn has been discontinued. I think it was replaced with a different type or like name of chenille yarn. But this is a super bulky weight chenille yarn. It's very soft. It does make a good blanket, but it is a little tricky because it's hard to weave the ends in. It's not hard to weave them in, but it's hard to get them to stay. So hopefully you can see. So for each stripe, I had to knit the end in on each side when I changed colors. And these have come undone a lot. I've had to weave the ends a few times. I think like just two times so far, but we've had this blanket for about a year now, and it's just like I constantly have to reweave the ends. And another con or like downside of this yarn would be it has no stretch at all. So it is a little bit rough on the hands when you're knitting with it, just because it has no give, because the center, like the core of the yarn is like a thread. I'm not sure, I mean the thread I guess is made of polyester because this yarn is 100% polyester, but it has a thread core, and then the chenille fibers just kind of like come out from that middle thread. So it doesn't have any elasticity or stretch, But like I said, it does make a good blanket. This blanket is very soft and warm and comfortable. My daughter uses it all the time, and we take it with us in the car when it's chilly, or in the stroller too sometimes. So it's a good yarn for a blanket, but I don't think I would use it again just because of the end weaving issue. I don't know how else I would get them to stay. I'm not sure. I guess I could like take a sewing machine and like sew them down, but that seems so extreme. So, but yeah, this is my basket weave baby blanket. This worked up pretty quick as well because the yarn is a super bulky weight, and I used like the world's most gigantic knitting needles to make it. I don't remember what size they were. I just remember they were like comically large. And it does have a border of garter stitch as well on the sides and on the top and the bottom. And this was fun to work on. It was exciting because it was right before my daughter was born, and I was just excited to get her nursery set up and everything and pick out the colors. So there's a lot of good memories with this blanket, but I don't think I would use that yarn again. I love making baby blankets because they work up so fast. They're so satisfying. I think these are the one item that I'm like the most excited to talk about. I love these socks. These are the vanilla socks on 9-inch circulars by the Crazy Sock Lady, and I knit them up with the Patton's Croy sock yarn in the colorway Sidewalk Chalk. So these were my first pair of socks ever, and I wear them seriously like every other day. Ever since I've made them, I wear these at least like 2 or 3 times a week, and they don't have a lot of crazy pilling or anything. They do have a little bit of pilling here. I guess it's kind of a lot actually. They have some pilling on the heel, but that's just from the winter time when I wear these in my boots. They rub a lot right here on the heel of my boot. I know in the knitting community, socks are kind of like a niche like item. Either you're like a sock knitter or you're not. Like either you get it. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And I get it. I loved knitting these. I like making socks, especially with the 9-inch circulars. I think if I didn't use the 9-inch circulars, I wouldn't be as interested in making socks, but they work up quick on the 9-inch circulars. They're comfortable to knit on the 9-inch circulars. And yeah, they're just really satisfying. Plus, I get a lot of use out of them because my feet are always cold. When I made these was around when I started watching YouTube videos about knitting and knitting podcasts. One of my recommended videos was it was like a multi-part series, but I just watched the first one. It's called No Fear Sock Knitting by Earth Tones Girl. But it really intrigued me and inspired me to knit some socks. But in that video, she talks about like yarns and like materials that you'll need. She mentions the Patton's Croy sock yarn, and she says it's a really good workhorse yarn for socks. I was like, oh, I should get some of that. So I did. And it's really fun to pick out the sock yarn because they have like a million different colorways. They have a ton. So it's really fun to browse and pick out different colors, and they have all different kinds of variations too. Like there's a bunch of variegated ones, there's some solids, and there's like different stripes, just all different kinds of stuff. So I liked these because of the little because of the pastel-ish color palette. I guess I wouldn't call it totally pastel, but it is, I don't know, I just like this color palette. I think it's really cute. So some info on the yarn. It is a 2-ply fingering weight sock yarn, and it is superwash. It is 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon, and each skein is 50 grams. So in order to make 2 crew length socks, you would need, sorry, there's a train going by right now. You would need 2 50-gram skeins. After I watched that video, the No Fear sock knitting class, and then after I bought the yarn, I found Crazy Sock Lady on YouTube. That was where I got my pattern from. The pattern is a free video on YouTube, but I like to have a physical copy to like hold and look at and like mark up and reference. So I did pay for the pattern so that I could print it out. I bought the PDF version. It's a really good pattern. They have 3 different sizes. I made the size small. There are 3 size options for this pattern. My foot circumference is 9 inches around the widest part of my foot, and then my shoe size is a 7.5, and these fit me like a glove, or I guess like a sock. They fit me like perfectly. The way these are worked up, so you use the 9-inch circulars, so they are knit in the round for the most part. You start at the cuff, and there's 1x1 rib, and you knit stockinette tube for the ankle, knit the heel flap, and then you connect here, it's a heel flap and gusset, and then you do some decreases here to get back to the stockinette tube that goes down the foot, and then you do some decreases here at the toe, and then you seam up the toe at the end. They worked up pretty quick. These took me, I want to say, about a week each. I don't have like a typical rate of knitting because I don't have a whole lot of free time, so I just kind of try to do it when I can here and there. So these might have taken me longer than the average person when it comes to like a time frame. And those are my only socks so far. I do have another pair on the needles now that I'm working up in the same pattern, but these are the only pair that I have made so far, and I love them. All right, so next up are my garments, so my sweaters. Oh, I forgot about this one. So I did make a sweater for myself. I don't have the finished object. I ended up donating it because I really didn't like it. It didn't look good on me, but it wasn't a bad sweater. Like, I think it just, I didn't make it to fit me well. This was my first knit sweater ever. So this was the Fall Bluff Pullover by Ashley Lillis. And I made this with Lion Brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick in the colorway Dreamcatcher. So this pattern is available for free on YouTube. That's where I found it. And it does require some super bulky weight yarn. I don't even remember what needle size I used. I think I used the suggested needle size. I sometimes wish I would have kept the sweater just for the sentimental reasons so I could like look back on it. But it really didn't make sense to me because I didn't like the way it looked on me. I didn't love the color of the yarn. And I also didn't love the feel of the sweater. So I knew if I did keep it, it would just take up space in my closet. And I kind of felt like it was a waste because like somebody out there might want it. I just don't want it. So somebody could get use out of it. I knew I wouldn't get use out of it. So I ended up donating it. I used the recommended needle size, which was 9 millimeters, which is a US 13, AKA big. And I used the recommended yarn, which was the Lion Brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick. It is a super bulky weight yarn. It's composed of 80% acrylic and 20% wool. I didn't love the feel of it. This is kind of when I realized I don't like the feel of acrylic yarn in a sweater. When I would try the sweater on, it felt, I don't want to say suffocating because that sounds dramatic, but it just felt not very breathable. And for the content of the wool, the 20% of wool just didn't seem beneficial. Like, it didn't seem like it was really doing anything. So I wouldn't use this yarn again, but it's not a bad yarn. I just didn't enjoy the feel against my skin. And the colorway that I picked Dreamcatcher because I ordered this online from the Joanne going out of business sale. Rest in peace, Joanne. I saw it in a skein on their website and I really liked it. And when it arrived in the mail, it just didn't, I don't know, like it didn't really look that different from the picture, but it just didn't look like how I expected it to look for some reason. I didn't love it. And then the stripes were uneven. So some of the skeins produced color pooling that almost made like a striped pattern in the sweater, but then other skeins didn't produce the color pooling. They would just make like speckles, and I didn't like that unevenness in my sweater. And the fit just really wasn't flattering. It was a top-down raglan construction, and there was no really shaping or anything, which is fine. Like, I don't think that that's a bad look, but just specifically the size I made a size small. I'm pretty sure I made a size small. I think what happened is that I just got so excited to finish the sweater that I cast it off too early because it was like too short on my torso, but it also, for some reason, it bellowed out at the bottom slightly, like very slightly. It had like a little bit of a flare. And I think that's because you use the same needle size for the body and for the cuffs and the ribbing at the bottom. I think if you were to switch to a smaller needle size, I think that might fix the weird fit and shape of the sweater, at least for me. But I didn't know that at the time, that you're supposed to use a smaller needle for the ribbing, and the pattern doesn't call for it. So I think it's just supposed to be very beginner friendly and not intimidating by including only one needle size, so you don't feel like as a beginner you're like, oh man, I gotta buy 2 needles. But if I were to knit this again, which like I probably won't, but like if I were, I would switch to a smaller needle size for all of the ribbing. And maybe put some elastic in the neckband too, because the neckband when I tried it on was like so stretched and big. It just was really unflattering on me. Okay, so the next sweater that I made was a big improvement. I made the infamous step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller, and I made this with Drops Nepal in the color light gray. And that is the recommended yarn for this pattern. So the step-by-step sweater is a top-down raglan sweater. It does feature a folded collar. This was my first time ever doing a folded collar. I think it turned out nice, and I really like the way it looks. I think it gives it like a little bit of a elevated look, I guess. And it does have you can sort of see the raglan increases here. This was also the first project I ever did where I tried the German short rows. So the pattern does have an option for either including or excluding the German short rows based on how comfortable you are with trying that. And at this point, I would have called myself, I think, more than an advanced beginner. I think I was almost at intermediate, maybe in between advanced beginner and intermediate at this point. But I did try the German short rows. They turned out pretty good. You can kind of see where my turns are, and I'm not sure if that's something I did or if that's just like the way they're supposed to look. I'm not really sure. But, and I think that's really the only, everything else doesn't have any shaping. The arms do feature a few decreases. You can kind of see how it tapers towards the end. And then there is 1x1 ribbing at both the cuffs of the sleeves and the bottom of the sweater and the collar. It is a little bit short on me, and I think that's also because I was just so excited to finish it and cast it off that I should have knit more. And I know I could always go back and either add some ribbing, or either I could also just go back, rip back all the ribbing and knit more on the body. But I don't know, once I finish something, I really don't want to go back and like do anything. The sleeves are a little bit short as well, and I think just the same, I think I just was excited and cast them off too soon. And I was also thinking it would kind of grow a little bit more with blocking. I'm not sure if maybe I should have stretched it out more, but for blocking, I literally just like washed it and then laid it flat, whereas maybe I should have like stretched it a little bit. But either way, I do like this sweater. I think it does look cute. It's just a little bit short and the sleeves are a little bit short. So this is post Ravelry, and it just kept popping up on the Hot Right Now page on Ravelry. So they have like a little, when you go to the pattern search function, they have like a little box and it says Hot Right Now, and it'll show you like the stuff that is really popular or that is getting a lot of views at the time. And this one was always like either number 1 or number 2 when I was looking for a sweater pattern. And another thing that drew me to it was it is free. So it is a free pattern, and the cherry on top was that there's a YouTube video featured where the author or creator of the pattern walks you through like literally almost every single stitch of the sweater. She walks you through every step, which is so helpful, especially when you're like kind of first starting out. Because like I said, I wasn't like a immediate beginner at this time, but I still wasn't super confident. So it was really nice to have the video to reference. So I did knit this with the suggested yarn, which is Drops Nepal, and I have the colorway light gray. This is what it looks like in the skein. I do have a few skeins left over. I think because I made this so short, I think it's supposed to be longer, and so I have like 2 or 3 skeins left over after this project. This yarn is a blend. Let's see, it is 65% wool and 35% alpaca. And I'm not sure if maybe I just am sensitive to alpaca or it's the wool. I don't know what does it, but this is pretty itchy on me. I have to wear an undershirt when I wear this sweater. There was one instance where I wore it without an undershirt, and at the end of the day when I took it off, my entire, like from here, my neck, like, and then my entire chest was red from irritation. So maybe I have like a sensitivity or something, or I don't know if it's just me or if it's this yarn or even what aspect of the yarn it is that makes it itchy, but it is very itchy for me. But it is warm. It does keep me really warm, and it is pretty like, it's soft. It's not like rough or anything. It just, for some reason, it has a prickly, itchy factor, but it is soft. And I did use the recommended needle size for this sweater, which is a 4.5 millimeter, which is a US 7, and that's the size I used for the ribbing. So the ribbing is 4.5 millimeter US 7, and then the body is knit with a 5.5 millimeter needle. And I really like the gauge. I think it's good for a sweater. It's not super heavy, but it's also not too, I think if I were to go up any more in needle size, I would not like the gauge because it would be too open. Speaking of gauge, I did not check the gauge when I was working on this sweater. I was too excited, so I skipped the gauge swatching step, which honestly, like, I would say I would never do that again, but like, I know I'm gonna do it again. So I skipped the gauge swatching, and I wish I wouldn't have, because this came out pretty far from gauge, and I didn't realize until I had washed it and blocked it and also like worn it a few times. For some reason I had the random thought, oh, I should check the gauge, like just out of curiosity, just for fun. And it's pretty far off. It's tighter. I am a tight knitter, but so maybe I should have gone up a needle size. But that is a lesson learned with this sweater, is that I should, if I'm feeling responsible, I should do a gauge swatch. I feel like especially for a garment, like, it just makes sense. It also features the option for a funnel neck collar. I chose the folded collar because I just don't think that funnel necks or turtlenecks are very flattering on me. And this is a sentimental knit because I started this just as my husband and I were leaving for a vacation in Boulder. We took like a long weekend and rented a cabin in Netherlands for Valentine's Day, and it was so nice. That was my first time away from my kids, so it was the first time I ever had like significant chunks of free time. So I knit up a lot of this sweater while we were on vacation, so it's just like, it feels really special to me because of that. Like every time I look at it or wear it, I kind of think of that memory, which is really nice. Yeah, that is my step-by-step sweater. All right, so this is my final garment. I think this is actually my final item. Yeah, so this is my last item. This is my good old raglan by Twisted Knitwear, and I made this with loops and threads, snuggly wuggly, in the color Fairy Tale. So how this kind of came about is when I was knitting these socks, my daughter came up to me and she was like, oh, what are you knitting? She's 2. And I was like, I'm making some socks. And she was like, is it for me? And I was like, no, they're for mama. And she said, can you knit for me? Can you knit for me a pink sweater with a white bunny on it? And I was like, okay. But so this was supposed to have a white bunny on it. I initially dipped my toes into trying Intarsia, and I didn't like it. It was just too stressful for me. So then I was looking up different methods for color work, and I found duplicate stitch, which I was like, oh yeah, that is what I want to do. So I planned on originally knitting this and then duplicate stitching a white bunny over top, and I just never did. I finished this and I was like, that's good enough, and my daughter likes it, so, and she's never asked about the bunny since then. So the pattern for this is a pretty vanilla raglan sweater. The pattern did call for 1x1 ribbing. I did do a modification. I substituted 2x2 rib. I just think it looks, I don't know, there's something about it I like better. And I also enjoy knitting 2x2 rib more because I feel like I can get into more of a rhythm with it. But yeah, this is a pretty classic raglan design. It doesn't have any short row shaping or anything. It's just a plain old raglan. I knit the size, I think I did the 3-year size, just so it would be a little bit oversized so that she could get some wear out of it this next winter as well. And the yarn I used was Michael Brand's Loops and Threads Snuggly Wuggly in the color Fairy Tale. This is a DK weight 100% acrylic yarn. It is pretty like stretchy and soft. It is a baby, like marketed as a baby yarn. It does have a little bit of pilling, but I mean, I think that's fair because I have washed this sweater like a million times. My daughter wears this a lot. This is like her go-to pullover when we're anywhere that's chilly, or if we need to take along like a jacket or something in case it's cold, we just take this sweater. She really likes it. But yeah, the yarn has held up pretty pretty well. I did use acrylic yarn instead of any sort of fancy or natural fibers because I knew I would need to wash this all the time. Because if anyone out there is a parent or you have a toddler or you know a toddler, you get it probably. Like, it's just, I don't know, it seems a little silly to knit a toddler garment out of like a really nice yarn, especially if it's a hand wash only. So it took me about 3 weeks to knit this up. It did go by pretty quick, and I did use the suggested needle size for this, which was 4.5 millimeter for the body and then a 4 millimeter for the ribbing. Knitting up baby garments is fun. It's just like a baby blanket. It's like satisfying because by the time you lose motivation, you're pretty much done. So that is everything I made in a year. I kind of breezed through this video. I tried to have my notes handy to keep me on track, but like I said, this is my first YouTube video, so it might be a little bit of a rough cut. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Like I said, I'm just really excited to get my knitting out there and talk about it with like somebody or anybody. But yeah, that's all I have for now, so thanks for watching.